Welcome to Dentology, the Business of Dentistry podcast. In this podcast, we delve into the non-clinical aspects of dentistry with inspirational guests from across the profession. You will hear incredible life stories, pick up valuable business tips and be entertained. I'm Andy Acton and I'm joined by my co-host, Chris Drevens.
It's funny, isn't it? We've done this for quite a while now. We must be 60, 70 episodes in, something like that. That recording with Sharon just blew me away.
I tell you what, it's fascinating, isn't it? You know, you do have a misconception about hypnotism that it is you're going to eat onions as apples and cut like a chicken.
Yeah, I mean it's under the heading of sort of dental hypnosis, but that creativity that she wanted to apply in a different way, I think it's absolutely fascinating. I think it's going to really open people's minds to the potential of hypnosis in dentistry.
I say for me, I think it's one of those ones of, you know, whoever listens, the next thing they should probably do is definitely go and watch her on her YouTube or contact to understand that how they can make not only it easier for their patients, but easier for themselves. I thought it was brilliant.
But
really
also I was fascinated around how much acceptance there's been in the UK of it compared to you know, other places across the world, Europe and other countries.
But and I think finally I'll just say, and I'm going to use this phrase which will surprise people: the hypnotising a dog. Now, if that's not a soundbite to make you sound interested.
It was a great conversation today. So welcome to our latest episode of Dentology. How are you doing, Chris? You well?
I'm very good, very good. Can't wait. This will be an interesting one. Well, they're all interesting, but this is like a bit different, actually.
I think
this
it's
is going to be a bit different. This one,
I'm looking forward to it.
It's going to be good. It's going to be good.
So
no pressure, Sharon.
No. So today we are joined by Sharon Waxkirsh, who's a hypnotherapist, founder and director of Academy for Hypnosis, and the co-founder of the renowned Institute of Hypnotherapy for Medical and Dental Practice, IHMDP. Welcome, Sharon. I probably made a bit of a hatchet job of your surname.
I was impressed on your surname. I'm not too sure Sharon was impressed on your surname pronunciation.
How do you pronounce your surname?
Exactly as it's spelled, actually. So it's Waxkirsh.
Waxkirsh.
I think you did Waxkirsh. Yeah.
Waxkirsh.
That's good. Where is that from? Origins of that one?
Possibly Prussia, Russia, Germany, somewhere.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
There's not many of us in the world.
No, I've never heard of it. I've never heard of a Waxkirsh.
If you ever need to find a Waxkirsh, it's me or my very close family, my brother, my sister-in-law, my nephew, niece, and mother. That's about it.
Oh, wow. So I imagine if ever a Waxkirsh comes on your radar of some sort, they're probably related.
They're most definitely related.
Yeah. Brilliant.
Kirsh, isn't that a spirit?
I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably something to do with that. I wonder if you're like a distiller of spirits in the past.
Yeah, it might be.
As opposed to a consumer.
It could be. Who knows?
Just thinking, there's Kirsch, isn't there? It's like
Well, Kirsch usually is cherry, but wax in German is Wachsen, and Wachs is worker. So it could be cherry picker or something like that.
For that.
Oh,
Flip.
That's nice.
There we go. That's quite sweet. Yeah,
anyway, there we go. So
anyway,
we've done the genealogy.
We sort of drifted off on a weird old tangent there. Yeah. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Exactly. This is the podcast of unusual surnames. It used to be about the business of dentistry, but not anymore.
And today.
So anyway, getting back on topic. We're both London born and bred. I understand that's where you lived until 2016. You then moved to Indiana to be with your husband, who's a professor at Purdue University. So before we get to kind of that part in your professional life, just to give some kind of context, you know, what was life growing up for you like? What were the things that shaped you as a child to the person you are today?
Oh, that's a great question. Things that shaped me as a child, challenges of childhood, I guess. Family issues and moving out of and school. I hated school, I have to say.
I was going to say, was school an impactful one on you?
Dreadful experience. Yeah, I hated that. I was much more artistic. So, you know, I was in the wrong place. You know, the school system wasn't set up for people who are really into the arts. And I really loved art.
I think that's still the case. I think the school system, it works for the people that sit right in the middle. And if you're one way or the other, I think it can be quite challenging.
I agree. And I really was, you know, for me, it was all about art. And I just loved drawing. So I went to art school. as soon as I could. Literally at 15 years old, I'd got into the Camden Arts Centre, and it was fantastic. I was the youngest person there. The oldest person was in his 90s, and it was just tremendous. At the time, I couldn't get into a foundation because I was too young, but this was a pre-foundation, so it was a fantastic experience. And that was me. Once I was on this art scene, I was happy as anything. But once I'd finished art college, which I'd gone into had a degree in animation, I walked out of our animation school was the top, not only in the country, but one of a kind in the world. There was only a few. We had John Lasseter came to visit us to try and gather people, and this was when he just started Toy Story.
Wow.
It was incredible. But the problem was we'd learned how to do everything on cell animation, on 35mm, you name it. I could use a steam bag, I could splice my own work, do my own sound recording, everything. And the day I walked out of that college, computer came in, and none of us were prepared. It was literally, it was 100%. It was crazy. It was 100% success rate of jobs the year before us, and every one of us that walked out was like, oh, we have to really rethink. And there were some great people. I mean, one of the guys in my class, Darren, he went on to do. I mean, he did all the Meerkat adverts. So we've got some good animators around.
Real success in there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of them runs. Carolina runs the Animac, which is the Spanish animation festival every year. So we had really good students in that class, but it was just like, it just kind of broke down in terms of what we were able to do.
Did you not want to retrain, or was it just like another long
the funny thing was, I went on and did flash animation, but the funny thing was, my thing was, I don't want to sit in front of a computer.
Right.
Okay.
I just love the idea of hands-on, and I thought, this would be dreadful to sit here day in, day out.
To feel the film and stuff like that.
And lo and behold, my life is in front of a computer.
Yeah. but what it's a real kind of fork in the road moment, isn't it? I remember when my oldest lad, he studied mechanical engineering, and we were going around universities, and there was a guy who was a lecturer, and he specialised in hydraulics, and it was a similar thing for him in that he qualified in hydraulics, and literally within a few years everything went electrical. And he said for a period, because of his niche knowledge, he was really in demand, and it worked for him. But he said to the students, you've got to be really careful. And it's a shame back in your day, it wasn't identified soon enough to at least give you that kind of option. Because once it goes down that route of becoming digital.
Yeah, well, you say identified. I remember them bringing in a camera that shot 25 frames per second. And it was a digital camera. And they went, look at this. By the way, nobody can touch it. Look at this.
Just look.
It's so expensive. It was a big chunky thing. And I was just like, and we did a little bit on computer, but you have to bear in mind it was floppy disk at the time. So anybody that had done anything on computer, when John Lasseter walked in, he said, who's touched a computer? And there was just one guy in the class that I was working with on the computer, and he put his hand out. I said, well, come work for me. And he's like, well, I haven't finished my degree. And he said, no. So it was...
Wow.
We didn't know who he was. All he'd done at the time, John Lasseter, all he'd done was the bounce and squash, which is the ball and the
light,
and that's called bounce and squash. So it's bounce and squash, and that was a unique thing to be able to do on a computer at the time.
Wow. Wow. It's funny, isn't it? That's so. What would that be? 25 years ago? No, a bit old, longer than that.
And some. 92, I think. Yeah.
Wow. It's amazing how things have changed, isn't it, to where we are now. I mean, when you watch kind of, digital animation stuff now, some of those kind scene shots, it's hard to tell whether it's real life or animated.
It's true for us at the moment. We look at it like that, but then if you bear in mind, 1930s, and you had a model of Godzilla on the screen, people would have said the same thing to you. And us looking back at the clay Godzilla, stumbling around, we'd think it's hilarious. But at that time, people were equally as frightened when they saw these kind of things.
Out of interest, do you still, even though it's your past, when you watch something animated, do you sort of look at it in a almost like with a critical eye, or
No,
or
I
are you
never
now
did.
able to
I
do
wasn't a
just
good animator.
Oh, okay, okay, right.
I really wasn't interested. The only reason why I went into animation was because another thing about our school system is that we're funneled into career type colleges too early on.
Yeah,
And so
definitely.
I felt that I wasn't ready to do a specific art form. You know, when I came out of my art college, I wanted to do all art. I was still evolving. And they kept saying, well, if you want to do a degree, you have to do photography or animation or film or textile or fine art.
Very niche.
It's so niche. And it's like, well, I've just discovered everything. And so animation was actually the only degree that allowed me to play still with clay, at the same time make a film, at the same time use photography, build things. So it incorporated any art form that I chose at that time. But actually it wasn't what I was hoping for. I mean, I really wanted to just be an artist, which in any medium, and I didn't feel that I definitely didn't get it in animation.
Right. Yeah. Oh, it's a very interesting backstory in terms of kind of how that did sort of shape and impact your future life and your professional career.
Well, I tell you where it leads brilliantly into this career now is that in animation, I'm working with people's imagination. In animation, you work with imagination, you work with storytelling, you work with feeling. You know, what's the feeling of the character? You have to understand a character to develop a character. And when you're doing hypnotherapy, it's very, very similar. And I feel like I haven't actually moved artistic direction. I've just used a different tool, which is instead of my hands, it's my mouth. And so when I'm working with somebody's mind, they're telling me a story. And for me, I already interpret it into my own mind of what does that look like, feel like? And there's the story around it. So I'm really interested in the character and the characters that have made up their story. So I think it's very similar.
It's interesting, that adaptation.
Yeah,
it's like just a little tweak, but it's quite interesting. Yeah, I wouldn't have thought.
I'd have never joined those dots together.
Yeah.
I'd have never thought of somebody who had that as an interest coming out of school, and now your professional career. And you've been a hypnotherapist since 2006, but worked in a sort of self-development field for 15 years as well. Before we get to that. You now live in Indiana, although at the moment we're recording this, you're in London, as we found out before we started recording, just down the road from where our studio is.
In fact, you're here. Hello.
And you said in the details that you provided us with that it was a real kind of life change going to Indiana. So what did that look like from a girl who was kind of living in London to then going to Indiana? How different are they? What's that experience?
I can't say I've adjusted, and I've been there for a while. It's beyond different. I mean, I could say, if you said to me, Sharon, go to the countryside in the UK, I could understand it and relate some way. But in Indiana, I feel it's an extreme out of the box experience. You know, just I can't even begin to explain. Every detail of American life is different. What people see on the movies is, you know, when you think of America, you see New York, you see East Coast, or you see West Coast, or you see Florida. You have this kind of parts of the states that you see, and then occasionally you see these really weird movies that are set in some back of beyond odd place, and you think that can't be real. You know, the place where somebody gets hidden away in somebody else's basement for 20 years. Well, I've been to those places. I mean, they exist. And you just think, yeah, you could be in someone's basement and your neighbor would never know. It's a very odd experience. I live in a place which is a college town. So
I remember Indiana State for some reason. I don't know, it must have been in a film or something, or was it like got a good football team or something?
That's right. So there is a movie called Hoosiers or something like that, which is what you call an Indianers. You don't call them that, you call them a Hoosier. Nobody actually knows the origin of that. But the actual place is, all I can say is think weird movie. I live there.
Maybe not the hills have eyes type weird movie.
And bear in mind, no hills.
Oh,
No
right,
hills.
super
Flat. And we're talking about flat, probably. I mean, Indiana itself is about the size of the UK, or size of England, I'd say.
Flip.
Wow.
So, when I go traveling around and I want to get out of flat, it's, we've got a good 2.5 hour, 3 hour drive. And we're talking about hundreds of miles, because when we talk about drive in the States drive, I can do an hour drive and only end up in Golders Green here, but from Finchley to go, but in Indiana, you've literally crossed the country, So
I had a friend who lived in Iowa, and he was like, I said to him, so what do you do? He said, not much. And then I said to him, so if you want to go and meet your friends, what do you do? He said, you have to drive an hour. He said, to find somewhere where you can all meet because it's convenient. And for us in the UK, because obviously you come from the UK, it's a totally alien sort of concept, isn't it? It's nuts. It is bonkers.
Yeah. So you split your time between the UK and Indiana, or is it unusual for you to be over in the UK?
Do you enjoy it, Sharon?
Which one? I love London. I'm a Londoner through and through. That's for sure.
Do you like Indiana as well?
No. No. My husband has told me to stop saying that.
Is your husband listening?
he's around. I can see the benefits of being in a place like that. One is there's no rat race. It's super calm. Traffic jam consists of maybe 3 cars. It's extremely chill. And as I say, where I live particularly, where it's Purdue University, we're in a bit of a pod in terms of when you're in a college town, all you experience is students every day, student life, a lot of academia. So we've got incredible plays, musicals and lectures going on all the time. So I can be involved in a lot of interesting experiences that way. On the other hand, it's a drive, anywhere. To Chicago is my local sort of reality.
I mean,
how did you meet? Sorry, can I just ask a question? How did you meet your husband?
So
was he professor of Indiana when he was there? Or?
He's a traveller. He's a travelling type, and I'm a traveller. I mean, that's where we really meet well together, and we actually met in Prague.
And was he Indiana professor when you met?
Oh yeah. He's been there 25 years. So he's a professor of biological sciences. His expertise in virology. So he actually teaches the COVID course over there, and he's expert in Ebola. So how viruses get into cells is his thing. But he's also, we're flying around Europe at the moment because he lectures specifically on scientific ethics as well. So he's one of these whistleblowers. He uncovers bad science.
Okay.
Very interesting.
So it's really interesting because obviously when COVID was, in full bloom, he was bombarded with every conspiracy theory going, and he's able to discern what is a conspiracy theory, what is the truth, where did these ideas come from, where did they originate from? By the way, most of them were from the UK, believe it or not. It's an interesting fact.
Wow.
So there's been the misunderstandings that people have come out, and people say, well, I'm a scientist, but people don't understand what that really means. There's a scientist who, I think we mentioned just before we got on the call about PhDs and doctors. There are people who are really, I asked somebody in my career recently, she had a PhD and she'd written a book and named Dr. such and such. And I said, oh, where did you get your PhD from? She wouldn't answer. So it's there are people around who've got, wheedled their way in certain things. You don't know exactly who's got what, etc.
Right, yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So have you got the inside track on where it all started then?
Yes. But if you want a podcast with him on scientific ethics,
that'd be fascinating. That'd be a really interesting one. If he's up for it, I think.
Oh yeah, he's very, very. He's an incredible lecturer. I mean, it's what I learned during the lockdown period, because of course I'm in the same room as him. We happened to be in lockdown for some reason. We were based in California at that point. The best place to be in lockdown, I have to say. Had a great time. We hiked every national park in the whole of Northern California.
Wow.
I've never been fitter in my life.
Brilliant.
But yes, during that time, of course, he was doing his lectures and I sat in on them essentially. So I learned so much about virology and COVID and, the politics about it, the history of viruses, of the Black Death, the plague, everything.
I think for our audience, being medical based as dentists, I think it would be fascinating.
Yeah.
He might,
it really is
I think he'd need to dumb it down definitely for us and turn it into layman's
We can
terms.
ask basic, simple
I was going to say
questions.
he could get very carried away, but I think people would find that really, really interesting.
Yeah. Oh, well, great.
It is. It's a fascinating subject.
Anyway, back to you, Sharon.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, but back to you. So you're a hypnotherapist and have been for many years. You operate in the medical field and in dentistry, and we were talking about how it'd be great if there could be more embracing of that as a technique in dentistry. But just talk us through kind of how this came about and how and why you qualified and the differences between the medical profession and the
I'm
dental
going to
profession.
ask you a very trite question here. Is it a bit like when you go to a function and you're a dentist and people go, oh, I've got a bit of a problem here, or my foot, and when you say what you do people go, hypnotize me? Do they sort of do stuff like that?
I get two different versions of that. One is, can you do it right now? Can you do it now? That's the first thing. and the next thing is the
I've
other
already
question.
done it. You weren't aware.
So common question is, does that actually work? And I just think, why would
really?
you ask somebody a question about their career?
Yeah, no, I'm just blagging it.
It's like, and my answer used to be, no, I just do it and get loads of money for it. I just like, why would you ask that question? But the question does still come up. Does it work? And you just think to yourself, gosh, people really have no idea about what is the hypnotic state still. No idea. So I can explain that to you very quickly if you like. But let's go back to the first question. How did I get into that? So you mentioned the IHMDP. That was actually set up with myself and a colleague, Dr. John Butler. John Butler was my teacher, and he trained with a guy called Gil Boyne. Gil Boyne, unfortunately, passed away not that long ago, but I actually got trained by Gil as well, luckily, towards the end of his life. But John Butler, he's a neuroanatomist. He's a PhD psychotherapist. He's a wonderful teacher, and he and I went to one of his, I would say, early training. So I was one of his first sort of students that came out of his courses, and at the time John was very interested in surgery, hypnosis for surgery, and he happened to be doing, I don't know if you remember this, Hypnosurgery 5 Live. There was a guy that was on TV that had a hernia operation to be done with no anaesthetic. So Dale, the name of the chap that was the victim, he used to come into our course every other day or whenever, and just to practice, just to get his mind prepared, because it was going to be filmed. So there's a lot of pressure when you're doing that kind of thing. And so John had him in, and I was really curious about it. I didn't really know what hypnotherapy was myself at the time because I'm just studying. So I was just watching this process. But when it finished, I have a really good friend who happens to be a surgeon in Barnet, and he's turned around and goes, oh, did you see that thing on 5 Live? I said, yes. I said, he said, I've got a whole bunch of friends. They're really interested. Can you teach them? And I thought, can I teach them? I just walked out of the course. So I said to John, there's some surgeons that want to be taught. And he said, I've always wanted to do this. Great, let's go in there. And we had a big lecture at Barnet General. And for a lot of heart consultants there, all kinds, my friend happened to be a colorectal surgeon. And from there, we decided to set up the IHMDP, which is no longer exists because we became really busy with essentially marketing ourselves. And that was a thing. It was constantly writing articles after article into every medical and dental magazine. So what happened from there was a day where I was doing a live show at the BDTA, and that's the British Dental Trade Association. And they had this big bubble where we were offered a space to go in and do a live hypnoanalgesia experience with 2 clients, 2 patients.
Wow.
So I had the dentist ready. I knew the dentist. I'd been working with him already. I'd already had one of my fillings done, no anaesthetic. So he was used to me doing this. I'd already done 4 wisdom teeth extraction with another patient of his. And so I was working with this particular dentist a fair bit. So we went into the BDTA to do this process. John was meant to be there that day, and I was going to probably do, the talking, and John was doing the hypnotizing, or vice versa. We hadn't decided. Anyway, I get a phone call from John that morning. I'm stuck in traffic. I can't make it. You just start. And I was like, all right, I've got no choices. So, the first patient was there, and I did well with her, and I was both hypnotizing and doing the lecture at the same time. So you imagine there's still video footage of me on YouTube doing this. And then I phone him up. I go, John, are you coming now? The next guy's coming on. Are you coming? I'm still in traffic. He said, go on, you do it. And so again, the second guy was actually a phobic. I was so pleased he showed up. I didn't know he was going to show up, because normally phobics don't show up.
Yeah.
But he did. He was actually a filmmaker as well as a film producer, because it's from my previous life. And so he knew what I was doing. He said, right, I'll do it with you. So of course he trusted me. So came to that, and that was perfect. And then John said to me, Sharon, you've done more dental hypnosis than anybody I know at this point. He said, why don't you just carry on teaching the dentists? So I pretty much took that, because he was so busy with his own school, and he was the president of the American Council of Hypnotist Examiners, so he had his plate full. So I started teaching.
And he wasn't really stuck in traffic. He was sitting at home.
John was a great mentor, whether he was stuck in traffic or not. I mean,
it's an interesting one. Isn't
it was, talk about a good mentor to say, you're ready for this. Yeah. So that was it. I sort of, okay, I'll just carry on with my dentist. And I just, took the dentist. I started training people at Portsmouth Dental Academy, which is part of Kings and Guy's. And, wherever people want me, I'll go into, while I'm here, I'm teaching a lovely, lovely pediatric dental company called the Toothberry in Richmond. And I go there every 6 months or so. And I just, I love the fact that a company will have me in, because I know that every one of those people, from reception through to hygienist on every level, they're all going to be on board. And so they have me in every 6 months, just so that I can meet the new people, bring it in again, and refresh them memory and stuff. So, that's what I do. I sort of go to company, but then I started my own school in lockdown, because why not?
Yeah. And how is hypnotherapy adopted and accepted in dentistry compared to, say, the medical profession or other professions? Is it embraced, or is it kind of sort of pushing water uphill?
That's a great question, because I would say it's different overseas than it is here.
As in better?
Over here, it's better. Over here,
so it's more accepted here.
Over here, it's far better accepted. And there are simple reasons for this. If you have on your website hypnotherapy, or we offer hypnosis, you're far more likely to get those phobics or high anxiety clients to walk through your door. Because those people realize that no matter what that is going to happen, they know that you are more on board with them mentally and emotionally. Whether they even know what hypnosis means themselves, it doesn't matter. They just know that the dental company has taken their time to kind of understand that people have anxieties and issues.
Acknowledges it. Yeah, the acknowledgement is.
Whereas if you go to the States, where I live, it's sort of like I'm in a very peculiar place. So it's almost like a no, the devil did this. But in other areas of the States, it's trickling in, but very, very slowly.
Wow.
Very slowly. And I think there's another issue in the States compared to the UK. In the States, they're really prepared to give you anaesthesia for even teeth cleaning, anything. And they'll start with kids. They'll immediately inject a child to anaesthetize their mouth before, so that they don't, and they've got so used to medicating their patients that the idea of not using medication almost seems too mystical and
go back
unusual.
in time almost.
I suppose
So
it's just built into society that's how you treat people.
Yeah.
exactly. And over here in the UK, it's still not a thing in
Mm.
such a way. We're not, thank God, we're not sort of overly medicating everybody yet. I say yet because these things do fly over the water. But
Sharon, you said something that, sorry, you mentioned earlier on that you had a filling without without local anaesthetic, and you on yourself. So can you sort of put yourself into a
so you haven't watched my YouTube channel. Okay.
No.
So
is the answer.
YouTube, Sharon Waxkirsh. You will see so many videos on there of me doing hypnosis with others or other people having extractions of all kinds. I actually have two on there, I think, of myself having two extractions done by two different dentists. So yeah,
Wow.
it's perfectly possible to do self-hypnosis. I actually have a course specifically for self-hypnosis. There is a saying in the hypnotherapy world, all hypnosis is self-hypnosis, because essentially it's about you. Are you putting yourself into that state? The difference between most states are when you do hypnotherapy or hypnosis, you kind of think someone else is doing it to you. What they're doing is they're facilitating your ability to move into that state. And they're facilitating it in a way that helps you maintain that state. But essentially, it's your choice. It's always your choice.
So on that basis, Sharon, are some people resistant to it and it wouldn't work on them just because they've got a closed mind and they won't allow it to work on them?
You know, watch my YouTube channel and you'll see that I'm the first female in history to have hypnotized a dog for a hernia operation, no anesthetic. So I always think, is there such a thing as resistance?
Well, that's interesting.
It's a fascinating experience. I mean, you asked one of your questions, which you sent me in the email. What's the most interesting thing you've done, or something? Good question. And actually, I think about it. That is probably the most unique thing I've done in the hypnotherapy world.
So that must be. So is that like tone of voice then? I mean, that's because how do you get a dog to get?
Well, this is so. Again, I'm over in Purdue University area. We have one of the best veterinary schools in the world there, and my husband hopefully is doing his best to kind of introduce. Again, it's such a slow process just to kind of get people's awareness. I don't really, I've had people who will come to me and say, "Well, teach me how to do this." I don't want to teach how to do this, simply because we don't have enough research on it. And until there's the research done behind it, I feel it would be unethical to start explaining how to do this. And I'd like to see more research, but I have to say that we were it was done in a veterinary school at the time, and I had a number of vets around me. Of course, you can imagine that the room was filled up. It was a very exciting experience, and we measured the dog's heart rate, the dog's responses. There wasn't a peep out of this dog. There wasn't a grizzle, a moan, a whine. The dog had identical responses as humans do, in terms of. And if you watch the video, it's absolutely fascinating.
I feel I'm going to have to go and watch that video. Like those YouTube rabbit holes you go down.
Well, just subscribe.
We'll put the link in the show notes.
Yeah. Right. So it's really interesting. It had all the same responses as a human does when they are just in that state of, I'm having a surgery done, and therefore my frame of mind is on board with it. So when you talk about resistance, I think it's less of a resistance, it's more of an inhibition. And so therefore somebody kind of can feel like, really, there's another saying in hypnosis, fear is the enemy of hypnosis. But I also don't believe in that, because I believe, when I've had people come and I've taught this to my students, everyone's frightened when they go into surgery.
Yeah, no one goes, woohoo.
Yeah.
Right. So there's not a single person that doesn't kind of think to themselves, oh, what am I doing? Will I be safe? Am I going to be okay? So if you allow that as part of the process, then the hypnosis becomes very easy. So I had a lovely client, little girl actually. I think she was about 7 years old, and she was having no anaesthetic for some teeth removal. And so what we did, what I did with her is like, have a scream before we do anything. So she'd scream before any tooth was pulled. Then the tooth was done. No scream, no pain, nothing. And then she'd like, is it done yet? Yep, done. Next one, yeah, have a scream. She gave a scream. I said, good, let's do it again. So it was just allowing that emotional kind of, whoa, let go experience. And I tell you something, whenever you've done something with hypnosis on this level, you walk out of there high as a kite. I mean, no drugs. You don't need any drugs to be in hypnosis. It is, I get people off of drugs because I can say to them, whatever you have attained with whatever drug you have had, you can get that with hypnosis, because hypnosis can only tap into what you already have. And the drug can only tap into what you already have. It's not going to do something that you haven't got.
So if the inhibition is the barrier to it working well, does it work better? Is it easier to hypnotize children than adults?
No. And again, it is funny because people always say it's easier to do hypnosis with kids. Children are when you're in that state, so children are in the state from the age of 0 to 6. And you guys have got kids. So if you remember your kids when they're around 6 years old, 7 years old, they were really challenging at that point. 6, 7 years old, they know everything. And that's because their conscious critical mind has started to kick in. So up until that age, they're absorbing, get to the age of 6 or 7, and suddenly they are critically evaluating life around them and trying to connect what goes where. The yes, no, good, bad, right, wrong, and they're sort of pocketing it. So when you're working with kids, they still have that critical mind open, but it's not so developed. So therefore, if you're still got young kids and you're saying, right, you can do this, they'll go, oh yeah, I can. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to hypnotize them easier, but they're much more open to bypassing that critical faculty. However, if the parent is in the room, very often they look to the parent to see how should they respond. If the parent is responding in a way of fear, they will also respond in a way. And then so sometimes it's not easier to work with kids just because of the situation and circumstances around them where they're reliant on what the other person's response is.
Wow.
Right, yeah.
Anyone hypnotized any other animals?
Yeah. You can actually hypnotize sharks, chickens, which is where it comes from, by the way.
Chickens?
Yeah. So you remember everybody always says, oh, can you, if you make me into a chicken. There's virtually no, that was, I had this at a doctor's office once that I gave a whole lecture about hypnosis for eczema and all this. And then they said, have you ever hypnotized a chicken? And I said, do you have many chickens coming to your doctor's surgery? But I'll tell you where this comes from. Where this actually comes from is the first person to ever record the state of trance. Remember, it wasn't called hypnosis at that point, was a man called Father Kircher, who realized that if you draw a chalk line or a line by a chicken's beak, put their head down, they stay still.
Oh, I saw something on a video recently.
You'll see people do it. All sorts of
nuts.
Things.
It was bonkers.
Right. So all animals have that cataleptic process, and that's why I say about the dog, I would like to do more research, because I don't know, what the state of mind body is. People say, well, that dog must have been in such fear that's what it's doing. But if it was in fear, the heart rate would have been different. It was so relaxed. So again, there's a difference between that state of mind. What it does is it shifts our perception of what's going on, our needs. And therefore, doing hypnosis for any kind of surgery, to me, I always trust my patient, because their brains will shift to what their needs are. And I'm just facilitating that process. And that's what the dentist can do. They can just facilitate the process. Don't actually have to do that much. What they tend to do that takes the person away from that state is asking them about their pain level, or asking them, how does this feel? Or you will feel this, or you will feel that. Well, you're then having to tell that person, while they're in a highly suggestible state, what they're going to feel and how they should respond to that. And guess what? they're going to respond, but they're going to interpret it in their mind from whatever their experiences have been and their perceptions have been. So if you tell somebody, I'm just going to give you a scratch for an injection, I don't know why they use that term, a scratch. It never feels like a scratch. Yeah. I know what a scratch feels like. Having an injection does not feel that way. But you tell them it's that. And then, of course, their perception is, no, it doesn't. It feels like when I was a child, I had some nasty person dig me with, and then they go off there. Right. So don't tell them what to feel.
Yeah.
Because you're tapping into their perception.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It's a fascinating whole.
Yeah,
and
for kind of dentists and dental practices, what are the wider benefits beyond being able to kind of treat those nervous patients or those patients that might be dental phobic, or reducing the need for medication? Are there other benefits that?
The benefits outweigh. It's funny because I give such a short training, and it's so the value that you get for this training in terms of financially is huge. What you get for this. So the first thing I always ask when I give a lecture is, put your hands up. How many of you treat phobic patients? And everybody's hand goes up. And I say, you don't. Phobics don't come in the door. They don't. You get a high anxiety patient, but you don't get a phobic. To get a phobic, you'd have to drag them out their house first. So, the first person that needs to help them is the receptionist.
Right, yeah.
Now, if I teach the receptionist how to use certain language and what to do for that patient, then that's the first step that they may walk into the door. All that equipment that dentist has bought goes to nothing if you can't get someone in your door.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah.
Doesn't matter how brilliant you are.
Yes,
the other part of it is, once you have somebody that has come to you who maybe was a high anxiety and has lowered their anxiety due to the way you speak to them, the way you work with them, they are going to make multiple referrals. You are the dentist to be seen. So then you've got a whole bunch of people. Yeah, you might be working with more anxious people initially, but you'll get loads more. So that in itself. The other part of it is, you are calmer as a dentist because your patient is more compliant. When you have somebody in a hypnotic state, they are super compliant. They relax, they lie down, they might even feel as though they're going to sleep. Now, you might say, I've got lots of patients that go to sleep. Maybe they put themselves into that self-hypnotic state automatically, that's fine. But what about the ones that don't, who are sitting there gripping the handles, who are trying to breathe, who are have gag reflex, who have bad hygiene, practices? You want them to start to, you can hypnotize them into doing that.
And I suppose also, though, if you're hypnotizing a patient, then does it follow that you yourself are then becoming more relaxed, because you've got to be relaxed to be able to hypnotize your patient, because you can't be stressed to trying to hypnotize them. So
100%.
So you have the benefit of not only working on a relaxed patient, but you sort of relax yourself because you're allowing yourself to be relaxed.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's got to be a bonus as well.
It just sounds like a much calmer surgery.
Yeah. Rather than freaking out and chasing your tail. Yeah.
Exactly. And of course, a lot of dentists suffer a lot with back pain from hunching over. The position that a dentist finds himself in is very uncomfortable on the most part. And so when using hypnosis for themselves for pain control or to ease up some of these muscles, it's a no-brainer on so many levels. I mean, I went to one dental practice and they said, could you just help us with our cookie addiction? I said, why have you got cookie addiction? Well, of course, all the patients used to give them cookies post surgery.
Thank you very much.
And they were just piling up, and all the dental nurses and the team was stuffing themselves. So I actually did a whole weight loss program for them.
That's brilliant.
That's crazy.
Really bigger doors.
So, but in most, it financially, it works out brilliantly. And I often say, if you teach this, once I teach a dental practice, and I always prefer them to bring in as many colleagues as they can, as I say, from receptionists right through, forget all this hierarchy stuff, because I tell you, your patient is the one who is not interested in that. They just want to be able to get through the door. When you start doing this as a core part of your practice, you can then actually have special session days where you only invite the phobic people to come just to walk into the door and say, we're having a tea reception, just to meet us, because you don't realize that these people who are phobic, they have a fear of the dentist, not even necessarily the process. There's often have had some problem in their past from some kind of difficult dental practitioner, unfortunately.
Wow.
What does success look like for you, Sharon?
I feel like success is every patient walking out with a smile. You know, that to me is success. And I also feel success is with my students, that they are really fantastic in that they're now taking that leap to become medical and dental hypnotherapists. There are very few of us who do this. And my hope is that the more I can train to do it in a practical way, not just theoretical, but practical, they can then go to the big wide world and then talk to other dentists and surgeons, anaesthetists, etc. So, you know, that's what I'd love to see.
I sense a frustration on your part that it's all a bit slow.
You know, it's been slow since, I think, 1700.
Right, yeah. So it's had a long run up, hasn't it?
It's not likely going to speed up, is it?
There have been, the history of hypnosis has had such a clash with the medical world because of the misunderstandings. There are really great neurologists now. There's a guy, actually, a British guy, who's in the States working on neurology of hypnosis for pain control, Mark Jensen. And, you know, we're finding out more and more material, but even he says, for his own research, he won't have any answers until the next 3 years as to how it works and why. So you can imagine, you know, 200 years ago, when this was the only form of anaesthesia for some time.
Right, yeah.
People think Derren Brown, though, don't they? I suppose that's the problem, isn't it? That they think you're going to make them cluck like a chicken, or you know, eat.
Well, Derren Brown is. Have you watched his stuff lately? Actually, brilliant. I mean, I you know, his combination between mentalism, magic, and hypnosis is absolutely wonderful. So it goes two ways. You've got the people who are the mentalists and the Derren Browns of the world, and they really show how the mind can be manipulated for good or bad, either way, or for fun or whatever. And then you've got, you know, a lot of hypnotherapists who have no idea what they're doing as well. And they've been badly trained. They have done very short trainings. There's no regulating system in the world at this present time.
Oh, really? There's no regulation on it? Wow.
Yeah, so no regulation. Ooh. So, you know, I could teach you on this podcast and say, I'll give you a certificate. Essentially, you're allowed to rock up and start.
Flip. And I imagine you can, and I don't know, but is it one of those ones that you can, if you do it wrong, you could do some damage to people? Or is that sort of like a little bit dramatic?
It's kind of dramatic. I mean, you know, I wouldn't say you can do it wrong during surgery. I think it's harder when you're dealing with somebody for therapy.
Right.
Because you don't, but then any therapist can say the wrong word at the wrong moment, at the wrong time, and evoke a wrong emotion or an unwanted emotion or something like that. So yes, there is always that. But I do feel that if you haven't had a really good training, you certainly, it's going to come across. It's you know, you're going to be sort of not so confident yourself about how to, you know, work this into the system with other people. So it's not that there's a wrong thing, but I mean, usually the worst thing that can happen in hypnosis is that you get a good rest, you know.
Well, it's not that bad, is it, really?
I was going to say, if that's the biggest downside,
as long as there's no trigger word that suddenly you turn around and turn into a baboon or something.
So again, people will do that for stage, but the brain will allow it to happen for a very short period of time.
Okay, that's
Right.
interesting.
So they'll play along with it, knowing that it's a very temporary
So
experience.
your brain will let you do that, and then it's
Oh,
sort of
yeah.
after a while it goes, for goodness sake,
That's rubbish,
I don't want to be a
nonsense.
chicken.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
The
isn't it,
brain's a
actually?
powerful
It
thing.
is
isn't
amazing,
It?
isn't
It's
Oh, we're
incredible.
far more powerful than we even realise. Far more powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, I've worked with people with strokes and Parkinson's and special needs, and my experiences have just been mind-boggling with these people. How
to
we're
what's
transferring.
achievable.
It's incredible, transferring different thought patterns to where it can land, rather than where it's not landing.
It's a bit left field. Is there any evidence that it helps people with spinal cord injuries, or is that an area that's not been explored?
I don't know where that's coming from.
That's a really interesting question, because it's something my brother and I are really interested in. He is an inventor, and he invented something for VR called the Roto. And what I'd like to do is use that machine with hypnosis and find if there's a way to use that for people with spinal injuries. That's what we've been talking about, that exact discussion last week.
It's only because a good friend of ours had an accident a few years ago now. I think it was at C. He had a break at C5, and he's exploring anything and everything to give him the best outcome and recovery possible.
Well, bring him along, because we want to. We it's an experiment at this point, but if it's a question of, how does the body heal? We know with hypnosis, the body heals incredibly. In fact, the body heals 6 times faster using hypnosis for any surgery.
Right. That's mad.
That is mad.
So yeah, I mean, I had some
you.
spinal work done. I had a bit of a bad surgery some years ago, and I used hypnosis not for the actual surgery. They wouldn't let me. They said, Sharon, if you breathe in the wrong way, you've got 50-50 whether you're going to walk again or not anyway. So they said, we're not doing this without anesthetic. And I said, fine, that's fine by me. I said, but do not give me any morphine, any painkillers, nothing. And so I came out of that surgery. I used hypnosis as my sole painkiller, and absolutely fine. I didn't need anything. And then, of course, I remember I still had no sensation in my toes. And I said to one of the registrars, I said, look, he said, how's your legs? And I said, well, I don't feel anything in my toes still. And he said, well, that may never happen, or, give it 10 years. I said, I'll have it done by the morning. So, and that's what I did. I just put my mind to it and got it done by the morning. So,
wow, amazing.
But that was me thinking of the Quentin Tarantino film, Get your toe to move.
Yeah.
That's what I did. That's exactly what I did. And the power of the mind, it doesn't have to be logical. And that's what I love. It's playful. We can really use, okay, I've got a movie in my head. Let's go for it.
Yeah.
I'm going to introduce you to my daughter with her chronic pain syndrome.
Yeah.
Oh, she has, is it chronic regional pain syndrome?
Yeah, sort of like everywhere. So she has loads of different injections and
she's my perfect. She's my typical client. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like I say, I think
that bit of business for you.
I think so. It's been a massive education. I think
it's been brilliant, actually.
It's
really
fascinating.
good. Really
Absolutely fascinating. I mean, what we'll do is, not joking. We should definitely put the link to a YouTube channel in the show notes. And if there's any other resources that would be useful for dentists to find out more about what you do, if you could let us have those, and we'll drop those in the show notes, because there are lots of dentists who are progressive. I know practice owners who specialise in looking after nervous, anxious, phobic type patients, and I'm sure they'd be interested to find out more about it.
It's
I think what they like,
cranky to mainstream, isn't it? That's the problem. Is people perceive it as
they perceive it, but actually, what I'm doing with most dentists is just tweaking what they already know. So I'm just giving them a little bit more information as to why or how what they already do is probably perfect. And I don't like to change what people do, because I don't like people to think, oh God, I've got to relearn something and doing it all wrong. And what I see is that, well, let me see what you are doing, and let's just use that to the best of its ability, rather than trying to make you change completely, because most people are doing things fairly well, but they could be doing it a lot better.
Sure.
Especially if they want to do things with no anaesthetic.
Brilliant.
Sharon,
Really
it's been absolutely fascinating, honestly. We need to wrap it up, but only for time, because I could sit and chat to you all day, honestly.
Have me on again. I'll do
Fascinating. Part 2.
Yeah, and it may well be that we do. We get feedback from people that listen to the podcast, and it might be there is a need for for more information or something different, or separately we maybe
hypnotise someone on a podcast.
Exactly.
Well, I do that pretty regularly. I mean, because I'm in Indiana, I'm doing hypnosis all the time on Zoom.
Fascinating.
Yeah. We always wrap up with our guests.
Going to watch the dog. Sorry.
Absolutely.
The dog thing.
You'll the moment you watch that, you'll say, right, we're having her back again. The questions that you'll have from that will be crazy. Yeah.
The dog whisperer.
Yeah.
We always wrap up in the same way, and we ask our guests the same 2 questions. And the first question we have for you: if you could be a fly on a wall in a certain situation, when would that be, and who would you be with?
So, if I could be a fly on the wall, I think I'd like to be about 300 or so years into the future. I would really like to see how the world has progressed, changed. As I say, hypnosis has taken 200 years or so to get to where we are, or plus, and some. I mean, actually, it can take you right back to the sleep temples. It goes back thousands of years. But I'd like to see where we are as humanity, what we're doing, how we're changing, how we've evolved, if we even do. I mean, that to me, so it's not really a circumstance. It's not like anything special, any fly on the wall anywhere. I mean, I'd just like to be in the world or on another planet, wherever we are, Who would I like to be with? I guess it'd be my husband, because he's so interested. And he's so interested in history as well. He's absolutely incredibly knowledgeable man, so I'd like just having him on my side is really helpful.
Right. I can imagine.
It's like he's basically my walking Google. Ask him any question and he'd definitely know the answer. So
next time we're doing a Zoom pub quiz. I know he's in my team.
Exactly. He'd be the guy for your phone a friend.
So this is the funny thing. He's an American, and so of course when I took him over to England, I said to him, right, we've got to do pub quizzes, because I'm like, the guy's a genius, we'll do pub quizzes. But what happens at pub quizzes? Pop music and sport, the 2 things that he's just not interested in.
So on the tiebreaker, the really obscure tiebreaker, he's your man.
That's very true, isn't it, in a pub quiz? So, if you could mention the Babylonians.
Right, exactly. And the funny thing
is the most famous building they built?
He'd tell you right now. So we are great on the pub quizzes when it comes to the history. So we get really high scores when it's all about history, politics, especially American politics. I mean, he's also a politician as well. He's just run for state senate over in
Wow. But who was in the Spice Girls? He falls down on that one.
No idea.
Well, we've all got to be good at different things.
That's true.
Which is
boring
good.
if we're all the same.
And our last question is: if you could meet somebody living, no longer with us, even a fictional character, who would you like to meet, given the chance?
I think at the moment, my dad just died fairly recently, and I think I'd actually like to meet my dad and just say to him, what on earth were you thinking with the inheritance? And then and then the next thing.
What a great question.
Brilliant. Oh dear.
And then the next.
Have you never heard of a trust?
Right. And then the next thing I'd say to him is, "What's heaven like?" I'd love to have some knowledge about something more outer-worldly. I think it'd be really interesting if there is such a thing.
Interesting. That's the second question.
Yeah, that was a follow-up.
It wasn't the primary. It wasn't about the inheritance. What's all that about?
Well, my dad always used to joke to me. He said, when I'm dead, I'm going to have to put a cash point machine on my gravestone.
Oh, very good.
Brilliant.
Very good.
Brilliant.
Sharon, it's been an absolute joy.
Yeah,
it's
lovely.
been
really,
really enlightening. We said when we started it was going to be a bit different.
Definitely more than 12 minutes.
I was going to say you ticked the box for it being a bit different for sure.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and like I say, I'd encourage people to explore it more. Sounds like a fascinating subject.
Fascinating. It's a fascinating subject, isn't it, really, that sort of is not really thought about.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do think about it and tell you, and listeners, I'd love to hear any of your questions, whether it comes through Andy and Chris or just through myself, through my own website. Just, ask away. I'm always open to chatting and stuff.
Brilliant. Yeah. Lovely. Appreciate your time today, Sharon.
Yeah, thank you, Sharon. Yourself. Thank you very much.
Keep well.
Love. It's great.
Pleasure. You too.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Dentology, where we discuss the business of dentistry. If you like what you heard, please do subscribe where you found this episode. That would be amazing. And also follow us on Instagram.